Greetings, greetings, greetings. Welcome to another episode of Black Women. I was hesitating for a minute. Black Women Are Dope AF. The hesitation was not about the Black women and how dope we are. It was, am I going to say the actual words or the AF? I'll just leave it at AF for now. We'll get into it further. You know how I do when I keep going. But again, this is our Black Women Are Dope AF series, and we are on episode 4. And today we are talking about Ethiopia's warrior empress, Taytu Betul. Before we get into it, just to tell you a little bit about me, I am Barbara Ohuninifa. I am an author, a coach, a speaker, and I work with Black women to help us remember and recognize that we are beautiful, that we possess power, and that we are love. We are the blueprint for love. We are the ones everyone comes to when they need love, when they need protection, when they need community, and yet we forget to do all those things for ourselves. And so my work here is about helping us to remember and tap into that self-love so that we can give to others, our families, our communities, to humanity from that overflow. If that's your jam, including this Black Women Are Dope AF series, like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things, get involved, because this channel and the work we do here is for Black women and to help uplift us, especially and in particular during the times that we are in here in 2025. So let's go ahead and get into it and honor this incredible Black woman. Let's learn a little bit more about her. Stick around to the end, and we'll talk about some of the wisdom that we can extract from her life and what her life teaches us as Black women and how we can apply that wisdom as medicine in our own lives today. But first, let's talk about who she was and, the work that she did and truly who she still is because her impact is still with us. So she was born in 1860, 1851 in Semien, Ethiopia. She grew up in an aristocratic family. That her family was an aristocratic family, and she was groomed for leadership. So, both sides of her family, her parents, they were from two major dynasties in Ethiopia's most powerful noble families. And her family made sure that she received an elite education, which included to speak and write the classical Ethiopian language, as well as learn military strategy. And you'll see later on where her command of various languages was critical in Ethiopia maintaining its independence. Now let's keep going. She was deeply involved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity Church. Or rather, Christianity as a whole. Now, Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity is an ancient African rooted Christian tradition. It's independent, it's theologically unique and culturally rich. It's very different than what we think of Christianity today, and particularly in the West. And how it makes it different is that the whole concept under Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity is that we are being made one, and that the unity of Christ's divine and human nature is at the core of that belief. And that belief is a little bit different. Well, it differs from Catholic and most Protestant views. And the Ethiopian church incorporates Old Testament practices like Sabbath observation on Saturday, dietary laws similar to kosher or halal. They use sacred drums, incense, and dance in their worship. So you can see already it's very different. And so, unlike European Christianity, Ethiopian Orthodox Church was never colonized, and it was never directly influenced by the Vatican or Western Christianity. So this makes it a very distinct African Christian identity. And all of this is what shaped Tatu Betal's worldview and her leadership. It gave her the framework for justice, unity, and divine sovereignty. So, this woman, much like many of the others that we've talked about, both in this series and in the Black History Month Ancestral Activation for Black Liberation, many of our leaders who did incredible things for our people, whether it was through creating resources, self defense, or straight up resistance, it was all from this idea, for most people, almost all, it was all this idea of it being a divine mission, a spiritual mission. And it was no different for Tatu Batal. And so we give thanks to her and all of the work that she's done. Now, a little bit more about her background and growing up. She was married multiple times before her final marriage to Menelik II in 1883. And then this was a political alliance that solidified her influence over Ethiopia. She was married at least 4 times because, as an aristocrat, as a noble woman, marrying and divorcing was a common thing. Again, uninfluenced by European standards and colonization, the idea of a woman having autonomy and being able to move in and out of marriages was not an odd thing. Um, Now, she, again, having come from that Ethiopian aristocratic family, oftentimes marriages were for political reasons and bringing and folks together. So there was never usually, and the divorce was not even about scandal or any kind of issues. They didn't have any biological children, her and Menelik, although he had children from previous relationships because he too had been married before. And she, Tatu, Mama Tatu, Empress Tatu, did not have any children. And again, their marriage was undoubtedly a political, strategic tie, but they also had deep respect for each other and had a strong bond. And he deferred to her and listened to her, listened to a Black woman, and she was unafraid to challenge him. So she was not only his wife, she was his partner, she was his co-ruler, which we'll find out a little bit more as we go forward. So again, he was the emperor, she was the empress, she was the co-ruler. She actually oftentimes was looked at as the true power behind the throne. She had, again, that upbringing around military knowledge and understanding, military strategy, and spiritual authority because she understood from which she came. And this is, and when he became the emperor, she was his most trusted advisor and strategist. He had significant influence over governance, diplomacy, military decisions. All of that made her one of the most powerful women in African history. She played a key role in founding the capital of Ethiopia today, Ababa, and many Ethiopian nobles and military leaders, as well as the colonizers who had to go toe to toe with Ethiopia. They respected her more than Menelik II himself because she was very clear and decisive, and her intellect, when she understood a thing and was ready to make a decision, she made the decision. There was not hesitation, but that's because she had done her homework and was clear on the strategy to begin with. And she played a critical role. One of the biggest things that she did for us is this role that she played in the Battle of Adwa in 1896. So again, she was a co-ruler and a strategic force. She helped to mobilize the troops. She exposed colonial deception, and she personally led soldiers into battle to defend Ethiopia's sovereignty and to defeat European colonization. And to be clear, Ethiopia is the only African nation that has been able to resist colonization. The Italians tried it, but they tried the wrong one. It did not work. So when Italy attempted to colonize Ethiopia, they did it under a pretext of a manipulated treaty. So she recognized, Mama Tattoo, Empress Tattoo, recognized their deception, and she convinced her husband, Emperor Menelik II, to reject the treaty because it was diabolical. And she organized, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And she organized war councils. She supplied the army with resources and commanded her own battalion of soldiers. Now, how did she provide the army with resources? Again, she comes from a long line of noble families on both sides of her family before she even became an empress by marrying Menelik II. She tapped her jewelry. She tapped her family's wealth in order to fund this war, in order to fund the troops, in order to give supplies and resources for the troops. And again, commanded her own battalion. And she personally led them into battle, an unprecedented move for a king or a queen or empress. And when the Ethiopian forces crushed the Italian army, This was the first major victory of an African nation over a European colonial power. And this was on March 1st. So we're basically at the end of the month when this happened in 1896. Now, strategically backed by Taytu, under his leadership, his being Menelik, they defeated Italy and they retained their sovereignty. Now, this shocked Europe. Europe was like, what the what? And inspired anti-colonial movements across Africa and the Black diaspora. You'll note in another video where we're talking about um, Queen Mother Moore and her work to advocate for reparations. She had created a women's organization and she called it the Ethiopians Women, because at that time and even today, Ethiopia stands as a symbol of Black resistance and sovereignty. So during the Marcus Garvey era and all of the work that he did, and Queen Mother Moore was a part of his organization, they looked to Ethiopia to understand and for inspiration and to know that it was possible to resist colonization and this imperialization that was happening. Um, so we give thanks to Mama Empress Tatu and to Emperor Menelik, who has his own understanding, um, his own status of nobility that he comes from. So again, this shocked Europe and provided a lasting legacy for us. Now, to keep going, the victory at Adwa was again a global symbol of sovereignty, and it helped us to understand who we were and what was possible. Again, the Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association uplifted Ethiopia as the promised land and the symbol of African pride and independence. So again, we give thanks for that. We give thanks to Empress Taytu Betul. She probably had no idea, or maybe she did because she was tapped in, the importance of what she was doing. She definitely was a divine mission that she was on, but we give thanks for her fearlessness and her courage and her outspokenness, because that is what's helped save us and saved them. And it's one of the many reasons why she is dope. Now it's time to say it, to drop the F bomb. She is dope as fuck. As Black women in general, all of us, Black women are dope as fuck. And in this series, we're talking about all of the incredible Black women throughout history, our ancestral mothers. And we'll talk in this part why she is dope as fuck. She was one of the most politically and militarily powerful African women in history. So, unlike a lot of royal women who were symbolic consorts, Tatu held real power as a strategist, a ruler, and a military leader. Again, Ethiopia had not been colonized, so those colonized values and patriarchy had not infiltrated. Even though she still did things a little bit different than in her culture, the things that we see now happening as a result of colonization and imperialization in terms of the value of women had not saturated Ethiopia. And her ability to outmaneuver European diplomats and military generals showed her intellect. So let's talk about this treaty. I mentioned that before, that she realized that the Italians were being deceptive. So in 1889, after Menelik II rose to power, Ethiopia signed the Treaty of Wachau with Italy. It was meant to define diplomatic relations and recognize Italian control over Eritrea, but while affirming Ethiopian independence. But the version of the treaty that was read and signed by Ethiopian officials in their native traditional language stated that Ethiopia may use Italy to represent it in foreign affairs, a voluntary diplomatic clause. But in the Italian version, which they shared with European powers, it stated that Ethiopia must conduct all foreign affairs through Italy, effectively making it a colony of the Italian kingdom. This mistranslation was intentional and was designed by Italy to gain colonial control over Ethiopia without war. What a punk ass move, I swear. And it was a common European strategy at the time. And it was a classic case of diplomatic fraud, just straight up lying and being manipulative. However, Taytu Betul, she was one of the first leaders to detect this fraud. She closely reviewed both versions of the treaty and recognized the intentional discrepancy. This is where having power over your words, having the education and the knowledge and the intellect that she had was so critical. Now, what she warned Menelik that the Italians were not acting as allies and they were trying to trick them. And she urged him to reject the treaty publicly and to prepare for war. She was not satisfied with diplomacy alone. She believed in decisive action to defend sovereignty. So she mobilized a national sentiment and called the Italian act a betrayal of trust and an insult to Ethiopia's independence. She personally helped organize and fund the war effort, again, donating her own jewelry to finance the army. Now, just pause for a minute. What if he had not listened to her? What if her voice, because she was a woman, had been silenced? And the wisdom and the intellect and the strategy and the awareness that she had to offer in this situation was ignored. The history would have turned out a lot different because she was the only one who detected the deception. And so, as the Italians attempted to reinforce their fabricated status, Empress Tattoo's boldness galvanized the Ethiopian resistance, and Menelik formally rejected the treaty. And the dispute escalated into the Battle of Adwa in 1896, where Ethiopia crushed the Italian army and preserved its independence, sent them home packing. Like, think about that for a minute. The Italians, which again was a common European ploy at the time, to say, oh, we're just going to have a treaty that says this one thing in your language, but in actuality, it said something completely different. And the powers in Europe looked at the completely different version of it. So they were duping all of these African nations into into being colonized. But Empress Tattoo saw the deception and stepped in and said, no, no, not today. Then used her own wealth, her own jewelry, her own assets from her family to fund their army and said, no, we're not just going to reject the treaty. We're getting ready to fight. We're getting ready to battle because if they're willing to do that, who knows what else they would do. And they crushed the Italian army and maintained their sovereignty. Her literacy, her linguistic awareness, her political foresight, her military strategy were all essential in uncovering this colonial trickery. And again, unlike other African leaders who were caught in the European legal traps, she anticipated the deception and moved against it. Again, having your strategy in place in advance so that you are looking and can move. I'm getting ahead of myself talking about the wisdom, but it's so clear that how important this was. And her leadership helped Ethiopia again be the only African nation to never be colonized in the scramble for Africa, where everybody was just dicing up the continent for its resources, both the natural resources in the land and the people who lived on the land and were a part of the communities of the land forever. Yeah, I said forever. And another reason why she was dope and still is dope as fuck is that she led one of the greatest victories against European colonialism, which we just talked about. That Battle of Adwa remains one of the most significant African military victories in history. And she directly participated in war planning. She refused to let Ethiopia fall to European conquest. Without her leadership, he may have accepted, Menelik may have accepted that, accepted Italian colonial rule either intentionally or unintentionally with that fake ass treaty. She is dope as fuck. Empress Tattoo Betul is dope as fuck because she was unapologetically independent and she did not submit to male dominance. Now, Her husband, Emperor Menelik, she publicly challenged him on multiple occasions. She was not a passive queen and didn't even try to pretend to be. Again, the colonizers never made their way into Europe. I mean, sorry, into Ethiopia. So this idea uh, of separating women and demeaning women and reducing our voices or taking away our voices and power had not fully made its way. But you weren't going to do that to her anyway. She consolidated power in her own hands. She dismissed corrupt officials and made sure that she actually stood up and continued to rule Ethiopia independently when Menelik's health began to decline. She held her own in war councils and she demanded that Ethiopia fight rather than submit. Kind of reminds me of Nana Ya Ashantiwa that we talked about in our last episode. When the men hesitated, she said, "No, no, that British governor will not sit on our sacred golden stool." Just as Empress Tattoo said, "No, no, we will not be a colony of Italy." And she did what needed to be done. And we give thanks for her bravery, for her commitment, and for her outspokenness. And the other reason why Empress Taytu Betul is dope as fuck is that her legacy shaped Ethiopia's identity as an uncolonized African nation. Because of her role in the victory, not to mention her role in uncovering the deception in the first place of the Italians, Ethiopia has become and continues to be a beacon of African pride and resistance. Future Ethiopian leaders, including Emperor Haile Selassie, built upon the strong independent state that Tetu helped preserve. To this day, Ethiopians honor her as a symbol of female power, intelligence, and anti-colonial resistance. We give thanks to Empress Taytu Betul. We say her name and we give thanks. Now let's talk about that wisdom that I was getting ahead of myself on. She and just like all of these black women that we're talking about are dope as the who are dope as fuck, because all black women are. And the ones that we're featuring in this series, they all have wisdom to leave us. They all have wisdom that we can apply in our own lives in our own ways. And one of the key pieces of wisdom from Empress Taytu Betul is that we should never underestimate the power of a Black woman in leadership, much the way the world has been doing for the last couple of hundred years. Well, several, and probably a little bit before that, which added to the downfall, but I digress. She did not wait for permission to lead. She took charge. Even in a male dominated society, she ruled with confidence, intelligence, and boldness. She gave no F's. And her wisdom tells us that Black women today, we have to recognize that our leadership is necessary and transformative. I would say that others have to recognize it, but the reality is it truly has to start with us. Standing in our power and our leadership, using our voices, doing the things, taking the action that we know is the right action to take to protect our loved ones, to protect ourselves, to protect our communities. We have to stand in that leadership. She didn't wait for others to defer to her as a leader. She stood in it. They had no choice. And so, how we can apply her wisdom as medicine in our own lives is to own our power as Black women. Again, this is in the title of my channel, Beautiful, Powerful Love. We have to own it and step into that leadership unapologetically, whether it's in business, politics, activism. Never dim your light for anyone else. Take control of your own narrative. Just as Mama Tattoo refused to let Europeans define Ethiopians' destiny, do not let anyone, any Cheeto colored fool, or any of his cohort of idiot billionaires define your future, your worthiness, who you are. Take control of your own narrative and define your future for your children, your family, your community, yourself. Lead with wisdom and strength. We know that Black women have always shaped history, and if we don't know it, now we know it. That's what this series is about, is to highlight for us the wisdom and the knowledge that they have been trying to hide from us so that we wouldn't realize who we are. We have always stood at the forefront in shaping history and defending and uplifting our communities, and today is no different. But what has to happen today is that we have to take care of ourselves. We have to nourish our own souls. We have to nourish ourselves so that we can give to others from the overflow. We are depleted, and it's time to power up within ourselves. Another piece of wisdom from Empress Taytu Betul is that we must master strategy. Her intellect, just like your intellect, is your greatest weapon, even if you don't think you have it. Taytu outsmarted the European diplomats and military leaders. I could just imagine they were just like, "Dope! Oh, shit, she saw it. Wait, what?" Because all of them had used it in all other parts of the continent of Africa so many different times that they couldn't conceive that someone would catch that lie. So she, in outsmarting these European diplomats, these Italians, is that she proved that knowledge and foresight win battles. As we have been saying, as people are effing around and finding out what Black women have been saying, sounding the alarm for the last year, 2 years before the 2024 election. Now they finding out she had the foresight, and so do Black women. Mama Tattoo understood political deception, and she refused to let Ethiopia be tricked into submission. Now, we're in a different place now, so we may not be able to stop the trickery that already happened, but we can do in whatever way that we are empowered to do in our communities and family to take care of ourselves and to master strategy and to look ahead to know what moves to make today to create the future that we want tomorrow. So it's about being intentional. The medicine is about being intentional about your moves, to strategize and plan. You cannot be stick your head in the sand and pretend like things don't happen and just let life come as it may. You cannot be a plastic bag floating in the wind. You have to know what it is you're trying to achieve in your own personal life, the vision you'd like to see for community, combine, connect with others to galvanize that vision and create strategy, plan, and execute. And the execution is day by day by day. It's not these big, huge things all the time. It's the decisions that you make every day that inch by inch, bit by bit, get you towards that bigger goal. Again, whether it's personal, family, community, hell, humanity. Because the things Black women have done throughout history have saved humanity. And we're kind of at the brink of that now. And another wisdom that Empress Tattoo Batol's life gives us is that you must fight for your people and stand firm against oppression. She knew that surrender was not an option, so she fought for their sovereignty with everything she had. She inspired generations of anti-colonial fighters across Africa, and she proved that defiance creates change. Hear that. Defiance creates change. These people, we are living in a time here in the United States and really globally because the same people that are wreaking havoc in the United States, they wreaking havoc all over the world. And they have their counterparts in other parts of the world that are wreaking their own versions of havoc. We don't have to accept it. We can defy the future that they see where pretty much humanity is enslaved again or further because we never really were fully not enslaved. But we can defy that, and defiance creates change. We're seeing signs of it as we continue to fight here in the US, and we'll continue to see even more. But how we apply this wisdom to our own lives with the medicine is to be fearless in fighting the injustice, challenge these systemic oppressions, and the colonial mindsets in all forms. And the colonial mindsets, to be clear, can show up in a brown skin. It can show up in a skin that's just as dark as any African or African American or African in the diaspora. The point is, all skin folk and kinfolk, we need to understand how people think and how colonized their minds have become. In the Ancestral Activation series, during the week of Sacred Restoration, we talked about a number of different ancestors, Black ancestors. I mean, they're all Black, of course, but ancestors who have done work to identify how a mind has been colonized. I'm paraphrasing it, but go back and look at some of those videos around decolonizing the mind. In that whole week, everything about that whole week of sacred restoration is about reclaiming our minds, because before we can, or before and while we're reclaiming our freedom in the physical, we have to reclaim our freedom mentally, because the work and the job that's been done on us as a people over these last hundreds of years, not only from the trauma that we've experienced that has shown up in our bodies and in our ways that we communicate, in the ways that we think about ourselves. It's that colonization has shown up in our education, in our medical system, in our financial systems, in every system possible. And so, to really fully have our liberation, we have to decolonize our minds. And that is part of the medicine that we gain from the wisdom from Empress Taytu, is that we have to stand firm against the oppression, even within our own minds, and speak out against equality. We can't just let the things go and say, "Oh well, that's somebody else's job." At this point, it's all of our jobs. Nobody is saying to we don't need to go out on the protest lines unless you truly fully feel called to, but we can still speak up. We can still resist. We can still boycott. There's work that we can still do in, again, our own ways that preserves yourself, your health, your wealth, and your energy, but at the same time pushing us forward in a way that preserves or actually elevates our communities. Because we want to actually go further and be better than where we have been, which, in some cases was great, in some cases it was not great at all. So we need to push for better across the board. And we do that in being fearless, fighting for injustice, society, workplace, or activism. We do that partially also by supporting Black-led initiatives and movements, Black-led nonprofits and community organizations that are Black benefiting or broader humanity benefiting, but Black-led is the key part, so that this is not a white savior situation, but Black-led initiatives and Black-led movements. Even Beautiful, Powerful Love is a Black-led movement. Holla at your girl. Click subscribe. As well as shopping Black, going out of your way to patronize Black products, Black businesses, Black restaurants, Black all of the things as much as you possibly can. Again, going back to the ancestral activation, the in the Sacred Shields week, one of the final days, one of the yeah, I think it was the final day, but we talked about the Black Wall Street and how the dollar stayed within the Black Wall Street community and circulated 36 times before it left. That is how you create wealth within a community, where all of the money stays within the community and circulates before it leaves, multiple times, versus now the money just leaves. Any dollars that we make leaves our communities almost immediately, half the time before we even get it. So when we look at Empress Taytu Betul's life, clearly she was a queen, she was noble, she was regal, she was born into nobility and also married into it and stood in that position. But she wasn't a figurehead. She wasn't this concept of queen that we have been colonized to think about. She was a warrior, a revolutionary, a strategist. And she reminds us that Black women are powerful leaders, warriors, and intellectuals, even today in 2025. We have to own our voices and reject the submission to these oppressive forces that are trying to turn back the hands of time and take us back to a time where we were enslaved and white men had free reign over everything and everyone. And to be clear, that really was only a brief time in history, but they miss it really bad and they're trying to get back to it. And no, no, it's not happening. Reject that. Do not submit to it. Own your voices. And know that our resistance today is a continuation of the fight she led against the European imperialism then, because they still trying. It doesn't come across as European imperialism now because it's United States imperialism. They got their own brand of ridiculousness. History doesn't stop and start. I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying it. We are living the continuum of the same energy, the same timeline. We didn't hop over to another dimension and timeline where things are completely different. We're living the continuum of the same timeline. And so we give thanks to Empress Taytu Betul and know that her legacy is a call to action for all of us, a call to action to Black women to lead, defend, and fight. Fight for what's right and to never surrender. And we give thanks. Take a deep breath and think about how these wisdom and medicine can apply in your life. Make a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you're going to apply it and what you think, um, how this can apply in this life that we're in right now, these times that we're in right now. And I will see you here next week as we continue our Black Women Are Dope as Fuck series. You can definitely click, all the sessions are scheduled for April, and you can click to be notified when we go live or, catch the replay. It's all good. It's all here for Black women to remember that you are beautiful, you are powerful, and you are loved. You are loved, you are loving, and you are loved. So until next time, as always, take good care of you.